Good Thursday to you, everybody in Com 710. Welcome to week boom 7. How's everybody doing? You hanging in there? This is this is a gigantic cup of tea because I am sufficiently caffeinated. Hmm. What do we have here? It's the Eddie Bauer cup gift from one of my children. I don't wear clothing or gear because of labels. In fact, actually make a point of trying to not wear clothing with labels. A little Wrangler tag here, notwithstanding, because I'm not a walking billboard for any entity. And, I don't buy clothing or gear because of a name. I buy it because of performance. Now, if good performance happens to coincide with the name, okay, so be it. All right, let's get things started. I don't know what the issue is, but for this week, at least for early today, YouTube's live video, which is how I usually record these stream, is not functioning correctly. So I'm recording this video on another app, and I can see from how the video. It appears to me, at least in recording, that there's a slight lag in the between the audio and the video. So maybe you turn the video off, or at least turn away if it's annoying you, or if it presents it as a lag, it might just appear that way on the screen. Okay, so it looks a little different. That's what's going on. Okay, let's take a look at what we're going to be doing this week, and then we'll look at what you did last week. First things first, you should all have your assignments in. That is your first papers, because they were due now, 3 days ago. I will be looking at them probably this weekend and have them back to you by the end of next week. All right. Now, remember, this first bit is designed to help you, to give you useful feedback about your writing, your organization, your research techniques. So when you go into the final paper, you'll have some ideas as to what you're looking for, rather than just, okay, here's the paper, and then it's the end of the semester, and how much does that help you? I've never found it to be that way. All right. This week, in terms of the readings, we're going to do something a smidgy bit different. Okay. Instead of a textbook, I'm going to have you read something that I did when I picked up my PhD from Regent. It was my second PhD program. My first one is in medieval history, which, actually is led into my interest in communication. As a medievalist, my specialty was apocalyptic preachers and writers. That is, those people who were saying that the end of the world was at hand, and what interested me a good deal was if you genuinely believed that the end of the world was nigh. And in my instance, chronologically, the area that I looked at a lot was the end of the 13th and about the middle of the 14th century, because that was a pretty rough time in European history. So if you believed that the end of the world was just, was here, it was unfolding, but you didn't have modes of communication that we do, how would you get the message out? And, this is a pretty important message, like, hey, the final judgment's coming. The world's going to end. So, um, you want people to hear about this. And so I began looking at means by which people in the 13th and 14th century communicated. And sort of one thing led to another, and I ended up in communication. Made sense to me. But anyway, when I did my dissertation here at Regent, at the time it was, back a while, in 2013, really starting in 2010, I was working, I was running a company doing humanitarian media for not-for-profits and organizations that were attached to the UN. I was hopping all over the world in a number of different countries, and I was seeing digital media begin to rise in terms of its use. And in particular, by way, and you have to distinguish when you talk about digital media. between the medium, the thing through which the message comes, okay, the platform, and the media, the form. And in particular, the media that dominated in terms of how the message got through was social media applications. And I was reading text. In fact, do I have it? Happen to have it handy here by my shelf? No, I don't. Anyway, I was reading texts, books produced by the producers of this media, that is the social media companies, Google and Facebook, and some others that were coming into existence, that were just extolling the wonders of these applications and how they were going to transform the world and how they were going to make people feel more liked and more friended and closer and give them all kinds of leisure time to become deep thinkers. And I thought, I'm seeing social media applications used in some out of the way places. I remember one instance in particular. I was in Eastern Africa, sitting out on the plains of the Kilimanjaro. It's this big high plateau, flat area that stretches between Canada. I've been working on something else today. Kenya and Tanzania, and it's the traditional homeland of the Maasai, and there are many Maasai who still live there, and herd cattle and live in small clusters of huts surrounded by just piles of acacia tree thorns to keep the lions out. These are called bomas, these structures. And I remember being out sitting on the plains of the Kilimanjaro, next to the tribesman, the chief of this small village, and he had just ordered one of his wives to start dinner, and that meant dragging a goat over, bleeding it, cutting off the back leg, skinning it, putting it on a stick, and then propping it up over the fire. And we sat and chatted and waited for dinner to cook. And as we did, standing next to us was one of his sons, who was dressed as the Maasai dress, just a blanket, I don't call it tobe, with a leather belt, holding the traditional spear that they carry in the one hand, and then texting on a phone to his brother who was out with the cattle herd on the other. And I thought, yeah, this is kind of weird. So I was seeing social media applications used in a lot of places, but I wasn't seeing the effects that were being ascribed to them by the producers of these things. And I'm naturally skeptical of someone who's selling something that extols the virtue and the benefit of the thing, beyond what seems reasonable to me. So I said, okay, fine. Why don't we ask some distressed peoples? I mean, not everybody in the whole world. Let's ask a couple of thousand of them what they think about social media. Do they feel more friended? Do they feel more connected? Do they see it as a useful tool to solve their most pressing problems? Because that's what the producers of the product were saying that they were going to do. So at that time, I was working also in Iraq. And when the war with the Islamic State started in 2014, I was in and out of the area, and refugee camps that were set up all throughout the north and west for people who had fled for their lives, and their cities had been overrun and their villages had been overrun. And I said, okay, you look distressed to me, living in a refugee camp. Let's ask you, do you use social media? What does it do for you? Does it make you feel friended and connected to the world? Is it a useful tool for solving your most pressing problems, including getting out of this camp? What do you have to say? The introduction and then some of the results of that study is what I'd like you to read this week. All right. So you can find that, and I've included a link in the week 7 module. My dissertation is for Regent is in the Regent Library. If you have any problems with the link, sometimes it can be a little janky. All right, just go to the Regent Library. I mean, I'm talking about online, okay, and put in my name and the title, that is Gardner J. strangers to the village, social media usage among displaced Assyrian Christians in Ankawa, Iraq. Okay, and Ankawa was the name of the camp that I was working in, that they were living in. Okay, and so here is an I hope that giving you primary source material and giving you the stories of the folks who are actually distressed will give you a more enlivened, and I don't mean like yay, but I mean, rather than somebody's textbook commentary on how this stuff works, hey, just ask them yourselves. And I encourage you to do that in anything that you're curious about, anything that you want to study. Always try to go to primary source. That is, go to the data itself, go to the documents, go to the database, go to the comments if you're dealing in online media. Go to the people that are using the thing that other scholars are saying, well, this is what it means and this is what it does. All right, look at the studies done by other scholars and see if they can be replicated. Because in a lot of instances, they can't. Okay. So I hope you enjoy the readings. And, you're not reading the whole dissertation. I mean, unless you care to. Just a couple of chapters and then one of the appendices, and you'll see why in the questions. Okay, let's take a look at the questions from last week. These things are brain dead. But you need to know this if you're going to talk about digital media, whether it's global or otherwise. You have to have these terms down pat. You have to be able to just go boom, boom, boom. Okay, because if not, you're going to sound like you don't know what you're talking about. The primary function of a search engine is to index. Question number one: primary function of a search engine is to index URLs. What is a URL, and what does it mean when a search engine indexes it according to your text? How much of the estimated total URLs on the global internet does the search engine Google index? What does this total suggest about the global flow of information on the World Wide Web? Okay. So first of all, when you start looking at the meaning of these various abbreviations and acronyms, you come to the inescapable conclusion that when they were naming the things for the internet, they really needed an English major in the room, because this the stuff on its own is a train wreck. Okay, so URL stands for Universal Resource Locator. All right, which it's just an address. It's just where something is parked. And I really do not understand why they couldn't have used the words address, or use the word address. I mean, I think we're all smart enough to distinguish between the address, like on a building, on a letter, or hey, I would like to say something to the audience, to address them. We can figure that out, right? But no, Universal Resource Locator it is. Okay, that's clear as a bell. Benjamin, let's look at Universal Resource Locator were created for individual using common interface protocols. Here we go again. Common interface protocols developed by CERN in Geneva. In other words, every website using these protocols is assigned a URL, and as such, at a minimum, a home page on the World Wide Web. Yeah. So this is you're telling the system where to go in terms of where the data is stored. All right. So what does a search engine do when it indexes these URLs? I don't think you answer that here, Benjamin. Charles, what do you say? URL, Universal Resource Locator. Okay. The estimated URL are indexed by major Google. Okay, you don't give that. Also, what does it mean to index it? Billy, let's see what you have to say. URL stands for Universal Resource Locator, compared to a street address. There, thank you, Billy. Exactly. IP addresses can be compared to house numbers depending on which. Okay, you still didn't tell me what it means to index it. Let's see. April. When a search engine indexes a URL, it means the engine has crawled that page, analyzed the content and the metadata, then stored its information in its vast database. Correct. In other words, it's found it. It knows where it is. And then when you type in that now back in the day, I was there when the internet was starting to spread out as a graduate student in medieval history. And I had a very forward thinking instructor. In fact, he had the second web page on the World Wide Web. His name was Dr. Lynn Nelson. May he rest in peace. And he said, this is the future of storage, communication, and research study. And you need to understand how this works. And back in the day, there weren't search engines, and even the ones that were very good. There wasn't something piling lists of all the URLs that you could, first, I mean, keyword search was really not a thing. If you wanted to go to a place, you had to know the URL. And so we just keep printing out URLs or writing them down. We carry around these phone books, in a sense, of URLs that we would use, and you would type in the entire URL to get to the site. Okay, what indexing means is the search engine records where the URL is, and then looking through what sort of data is stored in that URL, comes up with keywords, assigns the URL, what's stored there, into a category. And so now when you type in, recipes for onion soup, poop, up it pops. Now, of course, the difference between how it used to be and how it is now is it used to be the URL that appeared at the top of the search results was the one that people went to the most. And the idea being the answer that people reference the most is the correct answer, which, has some problems in and of itself. But anyway, it's not like that anymore. If you want to be at the top of the search engine results, you pay for it. So the most listed answer is the one that someone paid for the most, which I think to me is problematic in terms of how we locate information. But to the other part of the question, so how much of the total number of URLs, estimated total number of URLs out there, does the biggest search engine on the entire planet actually index? There's know where they are and know what's in them. And the answer is 0.03%, less than a third of a percent, which means nothing. Well, what does this suggest about the global flow of information on the World Wide Web? Okay, Billy, let's go back to you. The 0.03% of indexing by the largest global search engine suggests that the capability and use for the internet is limited by public use, yet other search engines exist for specific uses such as dark or deep web, and paid search engines or paywalls of the restricted content. Yeah, okay, that's true. That's true. Okay. Benjamin, what do you say regarding what this suggests about the flow of global information? It's important to note that even though the percentage index is low, it doesn't mean the flow of information is low. This is true. Information is flowing back and forth. The fact that only that a third of 1% of URLs are indexed does not mean information is scarce. Even the small percentage represents a massive flood of content. There are multiple reasons why. Okay, so that's true also. But you need, one of the takeaways that I want you to get from this question, and all of your answers are correct, but there is an enormous amount of information that the majority of the viewing public doesn't see. And there's a very narrow stream of information about much of the things that the public wants to see. And that is skewing the picture where any particular topic is concerned. Add to that is the limited amount, this gating, and it's not intentional. It's just there's just so much out there. Add to that the design. Search engines are not neutral creatures. They used to be, but they're not anymore. They're very specifically designed to generate revenue. And one of the ways that they generate revenue is that they log what it is a person looks at and then places results for their next search that align with the bias of that person, politically, socially, demographically, gender, age, interests, all of these things. Not just search engines, but information platforms, YouTube, news sites, social media. So you have a narrowing by way of practicality to a very, very small percentage, and then a narrowing again. I've heard it said of the emerging generation. What are they calling them now? Generation, I forget the letter that they're assigning to them. Now, this is a quip. So, take this to the bank. But this next generation, say that's just emerging into their mid-teens, is a generation that beyond all generations knows less about more than all previous generations because of the gating of this information. Interesting theory to dig into. Question number 2. Answer the following. Okay, the search engine DuckDuckGo claims it is the search engine that doesn't track you. What does that mean? Okay. Let's see. TT. DuckDuckGo presents itself on the web as an independent internet privacy company catering to those who are tired of online tracking and simply seek solutions. It attests that it is trusted by tens of millions of people. I believe it is true, though I am yet to find out personally. Okay, but what does it mean? Okay, now you have other parts of your answer. I see that, TT. But here's one of the things that I'm trying to get everybody to learn. I'm not picking on you, TT. When you're presented with a question, or when you present a question in your writing, be as direct as you can in your answer. Let's see, Billy, what'd you say? It means that what it means is a search engine that doesn't track you is unlike Google. DuckDuckGo is a search engine that's specifically designed not to keep track of your searches on their search engines. Search engines, maybe such as Google Maps or history searches, have been subject to complaints because of privacy use. And I can tell you, I mean, I use Google Maps, and I know that they're cross-referencing my search data because I may have looked at, say, the menu of a restaurant that my wife and I want to go eat at, and then the next time I jump into my car and I'm going somewhere, I place in Google Maps one of the suggested places. Like, I've got all this time to just get in my car and drive around. It's a very odd proposition by way of a communication. But anyway, one of the suggested places happens to be the restaurant whose menu I looked at. And it's like, no. Okay, so yeah, they're tracking your data. DuckDuckGo says that they don't do that. Now, my wife sometimes uses DuckDuckGo. I don't, simply because the results are even less rich than the very narrow results of Google, right? But that's what that means. Good answer. Okay, question number 3. Why did the U.S. Congress pass a law to ban the social media application TikTok? Is that law still in effect? What is your considered? Remember, I told you what I mean by that opinion about the TikTok ban. Okay, Benjamin. Congress passed a law banning, or rather sell to an approved company or face a ban because Congress viewed TikTok as a national security concern because of its ties to the Chinese government, which could potentially use it for surveillance, data collection, and influence operation. Okay, regarding my opinion on the ban, fundamentally, I disagree with it. It takes a more laissez-faire. I take a more laissez-faire approach when it comes to free flow of information, as long as consumers are fully aware that their data is being collected and potentially accessed by an adversary or maybe just anybody. I believe that they've given the informed consent. This trend of government banning communication platforms is, in my view, a slippery slope. Okay, interesting answer, and many of you had similar answers. I'm not that keen on it either. Okay, in particular, excuse me, the executive order staying the ban, which then I remember when it was signed, that is by President Trump, and the sort of the was, well, let's see, we could remove the ban, make the executive order permanent if they agreed to sell the company and the United States gets half of the profit, from the sales. This, I think, is a very, very dangerous precedent for a government to be able to step in and say, we don't like what you do with data. And by the way, in terms of data mining and data sharing, TikTok is the teeniest tip of the iceberg in this process. Okay, and Google doesn't say, oh, well, we're mining your data, but we never share it with any other entity. That is just not true. They sell it all over the place, and who knows where it ends up. So the precedent of a government saying, yeah, we don't like what you do as a communication company, as you point out, Benjamin, even though people sign the consent form, and therefore we're going to shut you down unless you agree to sell yourself. And oh, yeah, we get half the money. That makes me very uncomfortable as a U.S. citizen and as someone interested in communication. I do not think that's a good idea. Question number 4. When, where, and why was the internet born? What is the relationship of the internet to the World Wide Web? And this, again, is another one of these. You just have to know the terminology. Okay, Chuck, good. Let's see. The internet was born in the midst of the Cold War when the United States was creating community of operation plans by establishing a connected but disintegrated and geographically separate computer network. It was developed primarily for military applications by U.S. Advanced Research Project Agency and later designed as a Defense Advanced Project Agency. The scientific community, in the form of the National Science Foundation, saw the application of this ARPANET to their fields of study, which I used to use back in the day. Okay. So what's the difference between the worldwide this and the World Wide Web? Okay. The system known as the World Wide Web is essentially a single system, a system of systems that make up the internet as we know today. Okay, yes, that's true. I want you to be able to distinguish between, I mean, everybody, these very clearly, just like that. The easy way to do it is the intranet is the connective systems. The World Wide Web is the stuff that's stored thereon. Okay, but they're not the same thing. And by the way, it's more proper to speak of intranets than internet because there is no one gigantic internet. There are many of these systems, computerized systems. Many of them are linked, but some of them are not. There are countries in which they are closed and they gate what comes in and they gate what goes out. Okay, which exacerbates again the problem of how much data is actually being seen. If the largest search engine on the entire planet can only get to 1/3 of 1%, and then we have governments and organizations shutting them down, that is gating it down. Okay, so it's not as free and flowing as we might think. Okay, good job, everybody. I will get to your papers. Your second assignment by way of presentation is up. So make sure that you take a look at that. Okay, your second class presentation. It's due, into March 24th. Okay, and you'll find that over in the assignment tab, and it's really straightforward. If you have any questions, email me or call me up. All right, everybody, take care. Sorry for the delay. There was a problem with YouTube, and I don't know if they've got it fixed, but we are here. All right, so I think about you, I pray about you, and as always, I will see you on Canvas. God bless.